My dad's attacking my family.
Your dad is attacking your family?
No, my dad. Oh.
Daniel James Beaver, a 12-year-old boy, said these terrifying comments as he begged the police to save him from his two older brothers, who were running rampant throughout his house, killing everyone inside. Less than a minute after the phone call began, Daniel could be heard screaming and begging for his life until the line went dead. Police arrived quickly and were greeted by a gruesome scene that had played out all across the house. Blood was found scattered around the porch, and a faint cry for help could be heard from inside.
One of these surviving severed children, a 13-year-old girl, saying her brothers were fascinated by mass killings for at least a year.
Police responded to a ruckus outside the property's back entrance and discovered offenders Robert and Michael Beaver drenched in blood and laughing as though they were happy with what they had done. Robert was grinning and telling cops that killing more than one person had made him a god. Unfortunately, Robert's interrogation video was never made public, but 15-year-old Michael's is completely available and provides some insight into what motivated these lads to conduct such a heinous murder.
Hoping maybe you could kind of just go back at the beginning when all this started and kind of tell me what happened.
Once you go and start talking about rampage and stuff like that.
Okay.
I didn't take it seriously at first, but then you start buying like body armor and stuff.
Where did he buy body?
eBay and Amazon.
Robert's room was discovered to be full of weapons and body armor, including machetes, hunting knives, and daggers. Apparently, they'd been collecting all of this for months, but when their sister Crystal told their mother about it, she simply dismissed it as normal, saying that boys will be boys and there's nothing to worry about.
Start buying guns from?
He bought them online. I think the website's like Floyd's Gun Shop and he bought 2 Glocks, 2 Glock 41, and a shotgun here. It's like a Moss Blue, I think. Then he bought 250 shotgun rounds on eBay. And then I think he bought close to 1,000 rounds of Glocks.
Wow, okay.
Where was he supposed to pick those?
The ammunition, it was being shipped to the house.
Knives and machetes were one thing, but guns and over 1,000 rounds of ammunition were quite another. So once they'd ordered it, they knew their parents wouldn't be home when it arrived. But why did they need all of these weapons when it doesn't take 1,000 bullets to kill 5 people? It turns out that the brothers had a much bigger plan.
About making plans and what you guys talked about.
Making plans, we all plotted every night. Because he just says he hates everyone he thinks society's pointless. And also he wanted to famous people like Columbine and James Beaver.
So did you guys have a goal? Did you have a number?
He was I think like 50. Okay.
The two boys stayed up late most nights talking and scheming, and once they realized they were both separately interested in murder, the die was cast, and there was no turning back from their perspective. The boys had grown a bond throughout their lives due to their living conditions, and their parents, April and David, had become friends. David Beaver was somewhat abusive to their children, they were homeschooled, and even told not to interact with children outside of their own family. This left them alone with their own thoughts much of the time, and their only perspective of the outside world was the one they'd formed in their own minds. This is how they developed such a negative outlook on society, and what drove them to form the next part of their plan.
You picked a date, you said.
Yeah, which was yesterday night, and the date.
How did you pick the date?
It involved just inside the house, because all the ammunition, he didn't want them to see that. So we went to deliver them at the house first.
Okay.
And then wait for all the packages to show up over the weekend. And then we take the Yukon and we together our state.
So their strategy was set. Michael even stated that their plan was to cut up and dismember their family's bodies and hide them in bins while they camped out, waiting for the guns to arrive. He even added the gruesome detail that they only left Autumn alive because they planned to decapitate her with an axe a little later. But of course, all of these ambitious plans failed at the first hurdle. For the boys, everything is falling apart. The killings began when Crystal entered their room at 11:30 p.m. on July 22nd, 2015, to find them armed with body armor and knives. Robert cut her throat from behind after Michael enticed her to his computer.
She fell down and started screaming.
Yeah, whatever. Standing I kind of freaked out because and then my mom came in and she started yelling, call the police, get dad. And then he came over and started attacking her.
So he stabbed your mom with the same knife?
Yep.
And where did he stab her?
I think in the neck too.
Crystal had managed to get up and stagger out the door in an attempt to escape at this time, but Michael swiftly followed her and hauled her back inside.
Yeah, she was still screaming. And then that's about the time Dad came down. They got really by it.
With their parents dead and Crystal's neck slashed and bleeding out on the porch, the 3 eldest members of the family had just left their 4 younger siblings, whom they assumed would cause them the least trouble. This is also where we rejoin the earlier story, with Daniel on the phone with police hitting in his room.
Police had grabbed the phone, which is my phone. And then I went into the kitchen and I smashed the other phone.
Which was your phone?
Yeah, it was my phone.
I didn't have a cell phone anymore.
Yes, shortly after Daniel, too, was stabbed 21 times in the back, shoulder, and chest, the final 2 victims were hidden in locked rooms. But Michael managed to convince them that Robert was also attacking him, luring them out. And the brothers finished their attack by stabbing 6-year-old Christopher and 5-year-old Victoria to death. Throughout this interview, Michael had been blaming Robert heavily, even admitting at times that he was simply standing there letting Robert do all the work and that he was only involved because he knew Robert was going to do it anyhow and wanted to be on his good side.
I couldn't do it, so I was going to let him.
You stabbed somebody in the neck. I mean,
I just,
how do you feel about what you've done? No.
I didn't like it.
How do you feel about your mother? You watched her get stabbed, you cut her throat yourself, and you watched her bleed all over the place and scream. How does that make you feel?
Unfortunately, during his interview, Robert had no reservations about telling the whole truth and nothing but the truth, eventually tipping off the cops that Michael may have played a larger role than he initially claimed.
Guys that are interviewing Robert kind of gave me a quick version of what he's saying that you did. Yeah. You haven't told me everything. Okay. So I know you're not being completely honest. I'm just one of like hundreds of people that are going to look at this thing. We got the state police coming in, and every single stab wound that you inflicted, we're going to know about. Everybody's been stabbed, and you both had knives, and we know you both stabbed everybody. So you guys are kind of at the same level. Who's going to be honest and make this right? And who's a liar? Okay, which one do you want to be?
This simple language was all the cops needed to get Michael to open up and ultimately admit to being as much a part of the killings as Robert was. Michael confesses to cutting Crystal and his mother's throats, as well as stabbing Christopher to death, and as usual, one confession leads to another, giving us even more insight into the twisted kid's brains. It is now clear that the murderers were not motivated by anything personal and that the only reason for this slaughter and any that would follow was for recognition and fame. This became even clearer when searches of the home revealed rolling surveillance cameras and storage drives with all of their plans saved to them. Robert subsequently disclosed that they wanted to create 2 tapes, one to mock the cops and the other to post online. The remainder of Michael's interview film shows him penning a statement that was never made public, but whatever he wrote must have been really messed up, since the detective looking over him couldn't even finish reading it and reacted like this. Of course, neither of the boys had much of a chance at trial, but Michael tried to plead not guilty on the grounds of insanity. But it didn't go so well for either of them, and they were both given 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole. The surviving children, Crystal and Autumn, were adopted by the same couple, but the fact remains that this once large yet reclusive family now exists solely as a foul legend on the conscience of every person who lives.